All right, hello everyone and welcome. My name is Ben Rader and let's go ahead and jump right into it. So this is Risk Management, Shifts in Outdoor Programs Methodologies. The structure of this presentation is going to be an explanation and definitions of important terms. I'm going to clarify traditional perceptions of risk. I'm going to show the new research and ideas on risk perception. I'm going to compare and contrast the old model with the new model. I'm going to summarize and conclude. And finally, what I learned. So the purpose of this this paper and this presentation is this question that I had where I wanted to know how do outdoor programs see risk? Personally, I come from a background of working in the outdoors as a climbing guide, as a rafting guide, as a backpacking guide, and so risk is something I've always had to think about on these trips out in the wilderness. So I had this question of, how should we be using risk in the programs that we're running? Is it a useful thing? And then has that perception of risk changed over time? Is this something that we need to change? And then finally, does it add value? This perception of risk and this experience of risk, does it add a value to the model we're using for outdoor programs? Now, it's definitely very important that we define some terms because across different industries, I've seen there are as many as 46 different definitions of risk. And so we need to narrow that down a little bit for our purposes. So the big broad definition we're going to use for this presentation is the potential to lose something of value. And that's from Priest 2005. So that's a very broad, very all-encompassing definition, but we're going to narrow it down a little bit further than that as well. So two of the important definitions we're going to use are actual risk and perceived risk. So actual risk is any situation where there's a real likelihood of an incident or danger. That's from Runmo 2002. So this could be a situation where bad weather is moving in while you're in the backcountry on a backpacking trip, lightning, that kind of thing. That's an actual risk, and that's what we mean by actual risk. But perceived risk is a subjective experience of beliefs, emotions, and anxieties that individuals feel about risk, and that's from Berman and Berman 2002. So it's a subjective experience. Therefore, when climbing, one participant might feel very comfortable hanging from a rope and that they are completely safe. The actual risk of the situation might be quite low, but their experience of the risk could be high. So like I said, one student might feel comfortable, another might feel kind of out of control, scared, as if they are in a ton of danger, even if that's not the real scenario. So perceived risk is very important to programs because oftentimes students will have this perception of risk that really changes their experience and how they view what's happening around them. And lastly, inherent risk. So when operating in the outdoors, there's a level of inherent risk that's built into anything we do. This means that when we're out climbing on the rock face, there are certain variables that we cannot control, that we cannot completely take away from the situation. These things can be loose rock falling from on top of the cliff face. We can't always predict that. We can't always just prevent that from happening. So there are certain inherent risks that we have to accept by being outside. And these are actual risks. They're not necessarily perceived risks. They're actual risks that we need to be aware of. And these inherent risks are going to be a part of any program that operates in the outdoors. So important thing to know. So while researching this, I needed to look into the first origins of risk and how it was used in programs. And what I found was that Kurt Hahn who's the founder of Outward Bound, it kind of was the pioneer of these models that have been used to use risk as a tool in the outdoors. So the origin of Kurt Hahn is that around World War II, there were a lot of British Navy soldiers that were dying in battle, essentially, and a lot of the older, more experienced soldiers would survive these experiences, while younger soldiers, even if they were stronger, just more able-bodied to survive, were not surviving. And so what Kurt Hahn saw is that these older soldiers, essentially their experience, their ability to withstand stressful situations, because they had gone through risky situations before, were able to have the stamina, the perseverance to push through and survive. And so Kurt Hahn started Outward Bound as a way to create these experiences for young people to create resilience, essentially, to make resilient people to go out into society, so that they wouldn't end up in a situation like those battles in World War II. So he believed that risk provided a situation that encourages growth through overcoming stress and leaving one's comfort zone. That's from Warner et al. 2020. So it was really about leaving a comfortable place to go into a stressful situation to create growth. That was the whole process. Another way of looking at this is that risks grow participants' personal and social skills through outdoor adventure experiences. And those experiences need to be accompanied by real consequences. And that's from Martin Lieberman, 2005. So we have to ask now, today, if that was 80 years ago now, do we risk or do we not risk? What level are we accepting? So we can understand risk as having both negative and positive outcomes, according to Curtis, 2015. And that can be shown as a negative R for negative risk and a positive R for positive risk. And you might see that come up in the literature, that we denote a negative risk experience with that negative R and a positive with that positive R. And this actually comes from the financial sector, because if you invest into a stock, you're accepting that there's a risk there, but it's a positive risk, meaning that you have the potential to gain a lot from it. There's still potential to lose, but you also have that great potential to gain. And we can see that in the backcountry as well in programs when we put students in the backcountry and they experience something difficult that has risk. There's a positive outcome that can come from that, where they grow and where they learn more about themselves and their group and their team dynamic. That would be a positive risk. However, there are negative risks, like if you are on a mountain and skiing, an avalanche really is just a negative risk. That's the potential to you're only able to lose in that situation, and that's a negative risk. So we can denote those two differences with the negative R and the positive R. So perceived risk is a tool. And if you remember from the definitions, perceived risk is that subjective experience that participants individually have of a situation, regardless of the actual risk or not. So, according to Brevin et al. 1996, participants grow the most when they leave their comfort zone. Dealing with risk promotes self-efficacy, confidence, and competence, according to Brevin et al. As well. So, according to this study that I looked into, it says that getting out of your comfort zone and dealing with risk will promote the individual up into feeling more themselves, feeling more confident, feeling more competent, because they've gone through this difficult situation, they've gone through this stressful environment and come out better for it on the other side. According to Lieberman 2005, participants can maintain control and composure in a stressful situation, and that allows growth as well. So of course, we see that perceived risk can have positive outcomes, and research has told us that, but there might be some negative outcomes of risk as well. So actual risk, when there is true danger involved, the true potential for loss, can result in accidents that can cause injury or death. Also, these things can lead to lawsuits, And lawsuits can create enough problems to shut a program down entirely. Many programs have ceased to exist because of lawsuits. So this is a real thing that programs need to look at, how much actual risk is being accepted. And perceived risk can cause panic and unhealthy stress and anxiety, according to Berman and Berman, 2002. So many of these kids that are coming into programs like Outward Bound, like the National Outdoor Leadership School, like different adventure therapy programs, many of these students are already coming from difficult situations in their home life. They are potentially having, difficult problems at school that are stressful in their families, in all kinds of ways. So it might not be the best thing, according to Berman and Berman 2002, to build in more perceived risk to an experience in the outdoors if that's something that's already being amplified in other areas of their life. So we don't want to create an unhealthy level of stress and anxiety that pushes participants into the panic zone, because in the panic zone, there's no growth happening. Many participants come from difficult, stressful, and uncomfortable situations, like I said, Berman and Berman 2002. So what I found in the literature is that really there's a balance that needs to be found in programs, because at the end of the day, risk is useful, it's helpful, and to some level it's unavoidable because of inherent risk, according to Martin and Lieberman 2005. But amplifying perceived and/or actual risk is dangerous, and programs need to be very careful if they're going to build in more perceived risk to a situation or to an experience, according to Daniel et al. 2021. So creating a safe and low stress environment creates better change and growth than enhancing the perception of risk. So it's all about finding that specific environment to the right situation and balancing it out with growth, and also creating a comfortable and safe environment. I'd like to go over this quote from Berman and Berman 2002. It's from page 307, and it's quite wordy, but bear with me. Outdoor leaders must be aware of and sensitive to the signs of anxiety in participants. In assessing anxiety, it is important to try to determine if this response is situational or reflects a more generalized trait that transcends specific situations. This can be difficult to ascertain, however, as stressful situations will facilitate anxiety in someone with chronic anxiety. Also, staff should be aware of anxiety that seems to mobilize participants, as well as anxiety that seems debilitating. So, that's quite a long quote, but some things I want to point out in it are that the first sentence is outdoor leaders must be aware of and sensitive to the signs of anxiety in participants. This means that program leaders and directors need to be aware of what anxiety looks like in participants. They need to be aware of what level they can push their students into stressful situations without triggering traumatic experiences or the panic zone. And that's kind of what I want you all to get out of this quote. So in conclusion, risks have potential benefits. They do, and we've seen those time and time again. But they also have negative effects. Many students have been put into overly stressful situations, and as a result, never want to go outside again. They never want to climb again. They never want to go rappelling. They never want to go backpacking again in their lives because of one time being pushed too hard into a situation they were not comfortable with. The context and the particular situations will determine if the level of risk is appropriate. So outdoor leaders really need to be looking into each individual situation and the context that's going to inform the decision of whether or not they need to kind of make this a little bit more of an experience of risk, or a little bit, more of a comfortable and safe place for students to experience the outdoors. And like I said, many situations call for a safe and stress-free environment to help students grow. So there is value in risk. That my question was answered. There is value in risk and risk perception and experiencing it, which is good to know. So for growth to happen, though, participants need both comfort and discomfort. And that was a big one for me, is that it's an understanding the balance of that is what's most important with risk perception and building that into a program. And lastly, let the mountains speak for themselves, which essentially just means that there's inherent risk in the mountains and in the wilderness, so we don't have to do a whole lot of work to make them more dangerous or to create a bigger perception of risk. The mountains do enough already, as leaders, we can essentially just make a safe environment to grow because the mountains are going to do the work for us. And lastly, programs need a plan. They need to plan how they're going to deal with risk, how they're going to deal with actual risk, perceived risk. It's really important to meet a program's goals that they understand how this is going to affect their participants. Lastly, my references. Thank you very much.